David Parker was an unremarkable man living an unremarkable life. At 45, he was a single man with no children, living in a small apartment in the heart of the bustling city. For years, he had worked a monotonous office job, his days blending into one another in a haze of paperwork, meetings, and uninspiring conversations. But David was not always this way. Once, he had dreams and ambitions, a spark of curiosity that propelled him forward. He had friends and family who cared for him deeply, but over time, the weight of life's disappointments began to wear him down. Failed relationships, the death of his parents, and the gradual erosion of his youthful dreams left him disillusioned and empty. As the years passed, David's disillusionment grew. He saw the world around him as a chaotic, noisy place filled with superficiality and endless demands. He began to withdraw, retreating into his own mind, finding solace only in the quiet moments he could steal for himself. One cold, gray morning, David reached his breaking point. As he sat in his tiny, cluttered apartment, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee, he felt a profound sense of emptiness wash over him. The thought of facing another day in his dreary existence was unbearable. That day, David made a decision. He would leave everything behind, his job, his friends, his family, and disappear. He would seek solitude and peace in a world far removed from the one he knew. Without a word to anyone, he began to make his plans. David meticulously prepared for his departure. He withdrew all the money from his bank account, sold his car, and quietly terminated his lease. He packed a single suitcase with clothes, a few personal items, and his journal, the only possession he truly cherished. He left no forwarding address, no notes, no explanations. He wanted to vanish without a trace. On a crisp autumn morning, David walked out of his apartment for the last time. He hailed a taxi to the bus station and bought a one-way ticket to a small, remote town he had read about in an old travel magazine. As the bus pulled away from the city, David felt a sense of liberation he had not experienced in years. The farther he traveled, the lighter his heart became. After several hours, the bus arrived in a sleepy town nestled in the foothills of a vast mountain range. David disembarked, inhaling the crisp, clean air. The town was quaint and quiet, with a handful of shops, a diner, and a modest motel where he planned to stay until he found more permanent accommodations. David checked into the motel under a false name, paying for a week's stay in advance. He spent his days exploring the surrounding wilderness, hiking through the dense forests and up the rugged mountains. He relished the solitude, the absence of human noise and interference. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. David's disappearance did not go unnoticed. His colleagues were puzzled by his sudden absence, his landlord bewildered by his abrupt departure. His friends and family tried to contact him, but his phone went straight to voicemail, and his email went unanswered. They filed a missing person report, but the authorities found no leads, no clues to his whereabouts. David Parker had vanished without a trace. As the weeks turned into months, David settled into his new life. He found a small cabin deep in the woods, far from the nearest town, and paid cash for it. He lived simply, relying on his savings and the occasional odd job in town to sustain him. He grew a beard, wore practical, rugged clothing, and adapted to the rhythms of nature. David found solace in the simplicity of his new existence. He spent his days hiking, reading, and writing in his journal. He felt no need for human companionship, content with the company of the birds and the trees. He reveled in the silence, the absence of societal pressures and expectations. Years passed, and David Parker became a ghost, a shadow in the lives of those who once knew him. His family and friends mourned his loss, but they eventually moved on, accepting that he was gone. The world he left behind continued to spin, indifferent to his absence. In his remote cabin, David found a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He embraced the changing seasons, the harsh winters and the glorious summers. He learned to hunt and fish, to live off the land. He became a part of the wilderness, a solitary figure moving through the trees, at peace with himself and the world around him. David's journal, his constant companion, filled with reflections and observations. He wrote about his past life, his reasons for leaving, and the profound sense of peace he had found in his solitude. He chronicled his days in the wilderness, the beauty of the natural world, and his inner journey towards self-discovery. One spring morning, as David sat on the porch of his cabin, watching the sunrise over the mountains, he felt a deep sense of contentment. He had found what he was searching for, a life free from the noise and chaos of the world, a life of peace and simplicity. David Parker's story became a local legend in the nearby town. Occasionally, hikers or hunters would catch a glimpse of him in the woods, a solitary figure moving silently through the trees. They spoke of him in hushed tones, calling him the Hermit of Blackwood Forest. But no one ever approached him, respecting his desire for solitude. And so, David Parker lived out his days in the quiet wilderness, a man who had turned his back on the world to find himself. He had chosen a path of solitude, a path that led him to a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. He was never seen or heard from again by those who once knew him, but in his heart, he knew he had made the right choice. David's story serves as a reminder that sometimes, the search for peace and self-discovery requires leaving everything behind and venturing into the unknown. It is a journey that not everyone can understand, but for David Parker, it was the path that led him to true contentment and inner peace.